Hi people, how you doing? Hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we'll be replicating Sebastian Hunes. I think that's how you pronounce it. We'll be replicating and recreating his tactics in the game FC24. Of course, it is going to be a 4-2-3-1, and I'm going to show you how you can do it. So naturally, we start off with the formation. Of course, it is a 4-2-3-1 wide. I've made no real changes to any positions. So it's one goalkeeper, two centre-backs, two full-backs, two central defensive midfielders, one attacking midfielder, and then two wider midfielders, and then of course one striker. So with the tactics going forward and the tactical vision, I have set it to kick and rush. Now they do look to try and, look after the ball and have a possession-based style of football, but they also look to try and get runners in behind, sometimes bypass the midfield and try and hit those runners in transition, and trying to exploit the opposition's backline is what their main aim of the game is. So in order to do that, the tactical vision I have set is kick and rush. As for the defensive style, they look to try and implement a counter-pressing system, so pressing after possession loss is essential. They look to try and win the ball nice and high up the field, and then look to try and transition into a quick counter-attack. Obviously, it doesn't always work, and they're not always going to be super aggressive. I know Silas doesn't always press very aggressively, but on the left-hand side specifically, they do look to try and win that ball back very high up the field. As for the team width, I've gone with a smack bang 50, and they do tend to try and go with a man-to-man system at times, and more or less 50 does do this. As for the depth, it is set to 75 on the higher end of a mid-block / high line. They look to try and pin the opposition back in their own half in certain moments when they have the ball, and they are looking to try and ping it around the box and try and work something into the attacking third. But at the same time, you are playing a high line, so it does also help with the offside traps that you will look to set. And of course, you are going to be playing with a sweeper keeper, so it can prevent any mishaps from happening in terms of the counter-attack against you. As for the offense, I've gone with long ball. Of course, most of this does go hand in hand with the tactical vision. So it's long ball for the build-up play as well as direct passing. Now you will look to try and get those runners in behind. Gurasi, for the size that he is quite quick. Silas obviously very fast. Your number 10 in Melo is also very quick. Furyk, I think that's how you pronounce his name, I'm not sure, but the left midfielder also fairly decent off of his line, can break in behind with some pace, so you are going to look to try and get those forwards in behind and trying to exploit the opposition with that quick long ball from back to front. So Anton has a decent long ball on him, so I would suggest you do that, as well as your two DMs, very capable of trying to bypass any of the opposition's midfield and backline with that ball over the top. As for the width, I've set it to 70, opening up a bit more space between the lines for your attackers to try and work with and work into, as well as opening up a bit more space in the midfield for your midfielders. As for players in the box, I've set it to 8. You want as many players in that attacking third as possible. You want the likes of Silas and Gurasi more times than not in that attacking half, making sure that they are latching onto the end of crosses or cutbacks, as well as you want your fullbacks getting very involved in the play high up the field, whipping in crosses or cutback opportunities. As for corners and free kicks, as per always, I've set it to 4. So now moving on to the instructions at the back with the goalkeeper. Of course, it's a new ball. So for saving on crosses, I have gone with a balanced approach. So he can choose whether he needs to be aggressive with it and come for the ball, or alternatively stay on his line and try and see what happens from there. He isn't the best at always claiming those aerial balls, which is why I've gone with a balanced approach. But one area that he is fairly good at is being able to be a sweeper keeper, a very modernized goalkeeper, passing out from the back, being very instrumental in the build-up play. Of course, he does have that long ball approach that he can look to try and hit the forwards in transition as well. Don't be afraid to use your goalkeeper, people. And more times than not, you do want him to be able to claim those balls in no man's land and then circulate it back out into possession. Moving on into your backline now, we've got Zagadou as well as Anton. Both of them have the same set of instructions, and both of them have their base set of instructions, except for the fact that the interceptions is set to conservative. I've been trying this out a fair amount of late, and I must say I do like it a lot more, having a more structured, focused on defensive line approach for your backline at times. So Zagadou and Anton are set to conservative. As for the likes of your fullbacks, both of them are also set to the same set of instructions, so Stencil as well as Ito, or it can be Mittelstadt and it can be Wagnerman. They will also always be set to the same set of instructions. And I do know that Ito is a centre-back, but he does get forward a lot and he does add to the offensive line quite a bit. So, starting off with Stencil, he is set to join the attack and have aggressive interceptions. Now, because your back two essentially are going to be conservative and structured at the back, you can allow your fullbacks to be a bit more aggressive, imposing on the opposition, and that's more or less what we're going for. Their run type is set to mix, so they can look to add those underlapping runs to the wider areas of the field, or even link up with the midfield in certain moments. And alternatively, they can look to try and add a bit more width down each flank by adding those overlapping runs. And then as for the defensive positioning, I would set to step up, obviously making sure it's a bit more aggressive, a bit more imposing, and you more or less want that down your flanks. As you can see here for Ito, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Now moving on into the midfield, we've got Stiller as well as Kazor. Now both of them as well have the same set of instructions. You don't really want too much happening on either side. So we'll start off with Kazor. Cuts passing lanes, of course, looking to try and be a bit more zonal with his approach, trying to sweep up in front of the backline as much as possible, stifle and break up as much of the opposition's offensive build-up as you can. Of course, Stiller will look to do the same. Stay back while attacking. They aren't as involved by breaking into the box or anything of that sort. They'll look to try and, sit on the edge of the area and look to try and rotate play, or maybe even pop off shots. I have noticed with Stuttgart, it's more or less a shoot on sight approach. So if they have some space and they're in and around an appropriate area to shoot, they will look to try and pull the trigger. As for the interceptions, because your backline has also looked to try and be a bit more conservative, you can allow for a bit more of a workman-like midfield, and Kazor and Stiller will both be set to aggressive interceptions, looking to try and track down the ball as much as possible. As for the positioning freedom, it is set to stick to position, as well as the defensive positioning is looking to cover the wing. So if your fullbacks have bombed on too far forward, you do want your two DMs to be able to drift into those wide areas, pick up those runners, and more or less make sure that that zone is marked. As for the likes of Stiller, as you can see here, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Into your number 10 now, the likes of Milo, he is set to having a basic defensive support. So sometimes having the ability to link up a bit more higher up the field with Garassi by not coming back, other times looking to come back and link up a bit more with your number 10s, linking up play quite effectively between the midfield and the offense. As for the support on crosses, you do want him breaking into the box, attacking those crosses or those cutback opportunities, as well as having the ability to pick up those little half spaces, draw players out of position, open up space for Silas, open up space for Garassi, maybe even the likes of Furyk at times, with his innate ability to pop up in those little half spaces. As for the interceptions, I've set it to aggressive, although I do know that he doesn't have the highest of work rates, yes, but you do want him to still be very aggressive with his counter pressing. Onto your left midfielder now. Now this is where things become a bit more asymmetric. The likes of Furyk and Silas have very different roles. So we'll start off with the left-hand side. Furyk, he is set to come back on defense, looking to try and help out Ito or Mittelstadt as much as possible. The chance creation, I've set it to balance because he can sometimes look to hold the width, alternating between who holds the width between the fullback and the winger in certain moments, sometimes having him cut inside and Ito hold the width, and other times having him hold the width and Ito inverts a bit more. As for the support runs, I've gone with a balanced approach yet again, because you do want him to be able to have that ability to break him behind with that get him behind approach, or alternatively, if he does cut inside, you want him to link up a bit more with the number 10 as well as the number 6. As for the interceptions, it is set to aggressive, so like I said earlier, it's a bit more of a workman-like approach on this left-hand flank than what it is on the right, but nonetheless, it is set to aggressive for the interceptions. And then as for the support on crosses, he sometimes does get into the box and pop off shots and get on the end of crosses and cutbacks, but at the same time, he is more of a natural winger, so he will look to try and stay on the edge of the area and try and create for others. So onto the likes of Silas now as your right midfielder, so a slightly different role to your left, but nonetheless, he's set to having a basic defensive support, so sometimes hanging up the field with the likes of Milo and Garassi looking to try and start that quick transition attack. Other times he can look to try and come back a bit more and help out the likes of Stenzel or Wagnerman. As for the chance creation, he does tend to sometimes take up a secondary striker role, and in order to do that from that right hand side, you want him to cut inside, get off shot opportunities, or trying to create more inverted opportunities for the likes of Garassi or Milo in certain areas. As for the support runs, he is lightning quick, so you want him to use his pace all the time, looking to try and get him behind and exploit the opposition's backline. And then as for the interceptions, I've gone with a normal work rate, so it's a normal set of interceptions. He's not going to overly try and exert himself on the defensive side of things, but he can do a decent job. And then as for the support on crosses, consistently always looking to get into the box. Now moving on to Garassi, the striker who has scored a lot of goals to begin the season with. So for the support runs, I've gone with a balance width, because he sometimes does tend to drift in and out of the central areas, but more times than not, he will take up that central approach, looking to try and land on the end of those crosses or cutback opportunities. The entirety of this team is set up to supply the central area, so whoever is in that striker role or that number 10 role, they'll get a lot of the opportunities to try and score those goals. As for the attacking runs, he will naturally look to try and get him behind and use his pace, yes, because you do have the tactical vision and the tactics set up for direct passing, but at the same time, he does also have the ability to back into the opposition as a target man and take up more of those central areas with the link-up play abilities. The interceptions is set to normal. You don't want him working too hard off the ball and trying to exert too much stamina. You want him saved for the offensive opportunities. And then finally, as for the defensive support, I have him set to stay forward, linking up a bit more with the likes of Melo and Silas, but also being the out there ball more times than not. So yes, people, that is my version of Stuttgart's 4-2-3-1 tactics under the likes of Sebastian Hunes. If I've pronounced his name wrong, forgive me, but I will say this. In terms of the rating of the system, I would give it a solid 8.5. It works against virtually every single opponent. The use of the space and the pace of this team at times is very effective, and I think you can score a lot of goals with it. Anyways, guys, please smash that like button. Subscribe if you are new. The road to 4K has just begun. Mad love, mad appreciation, and I hope you guys have a damn great day. I'm out!